Hello everybody. So we've had quite a bit of compression in the MNAVs, or as I call them, the price to NAV of these Bitcoin treasury companies, mostly Bitcoin treasury companies I'm going to cover today. I'm also going to cover Ethereum treasury companies and one Solana treasury company, and we're just going to look at their MNAVs. And of course, the higher the MNAV, the quicker they grow the bag. The MNAV is how much are you selling a dollar for? So, in the case of strategy, they are selling a dollar for $1.62. That's the lower end of the historic range. I would not like to get into the 1.59. If we did that, the dilution would become less and less accretive. But MSTR has held up really well compared to, say, Metaplanet. Metaplanet is now under a 3 on MNAV. So that's as low as I've seen it on that one. Still very accretive, but nowhere nearly as accretive as it used to be. We need a little bit of optimism in the market for these MNAVs to go back up a little bit. But no worries, the dilution is still highly accretive, but we're just under a 3x, and this tells me we're in for a bounce. There should be a bounce in Strategy's MNAV a little bit, but Metaplanet's MNAV and Smarter Web's MNAV especially. Poor Mara came back down on the MNAV. We traded briefly at 0.99 yesterday. Well, like 0.998 or something like that. I was tracking it. Mara does the thing right. They can't raise with their NAV, so they're not doing that. They're not printing shares. They issued an 850 million convertible bond with an option for an extra 150. So they are going to borrow $1 billion to mostly buy Bitcoin. At least that's what I hope, and that's how I understand the announcements, because Bitcoin is the first reason that they list for doing the convertible debt, and they've done this in the past. And this is a form of dilution, but it's a dilution in the future at a much later date, and you get the money today for free. And so slightly different strategy. Of course, strategy itself does similar tactics of trying to borrow money to also buy Bitcoin upfront and ahead of the rest of the market. Not just a price to NAV strategy, not just a printing share strategy, but for all of these companies, the price to NAV, the printing shares strategy, the selling a dollar for $1.62 in the case of strategy. That strategy is the main ongoing strategy that they all do. Moving on to the Smarter Web. So the Smarter Web is in British pounds, so it's tough to find a tracker that uses the same methodology. I recommend the smarterinvestmentguide.com. That's the best tracker I found for Smarter Web. It's a 3.66. That's historically very low for Smarter Web as well. This one was in the 5 for the longest time, and of course it had a brief period of above a 10. Still accretive, but the accretiveness of the ATM here is somewhat similar to Metaplanet now, if we don't go back up a little more. So hopefully we go back up a little more on this one. By the way, it rebounded nicely yesterday, and so did Metaplanet. I don't have the chart, but Metaplanet rebounded as well yesterday. KULR. So KULR is the BTC treasury company that is entirely being ignored, or at least the space company that is entirely being dismissed because they're a BTC treasury company. They're a hybrid. They're a company with an actual business model. They're a company that had an actual meaningful business prior to getting into the BTC acquisition strategy. The NAV on this one used to be a 4. It used to be like a 4.2 or 4.3, and it dropped. But KULR really dropped, not necessarily because of the lack of optimism for their BTC treasury company. In fact, the BTC treasury company of KULR was never really the main thesis around KULR. No, it dropped because it did an 8-for-1 stock split in order to get an institutional bid to enter in the in the Russell 3000. They were added to the Russell 3000, They used to be $1.20 and they needed to trade above $5. Mission accomplished. They're trading above $5. The stock has been recovering slowly and steady, and sure enough, as soon as we cross the $8 price for this stock, we will be back to the level we were before the crash that occurred after they announced the stock split. The market totally ignoring why they did a stock split. The market just selling it off. Algo selling it off because stock split's bad. That's essentially what happened to KULR. They have a real underlying business of space batteries under the hood of this company. Riot is my out of all of the Bitcoin miners that actually pursue an HPC play, Riot is my favorite. I know a lot of people prefer Iron, but Iron doesn't qualify for any of these BTC Treasury companies because they don't own any Bitcoin. They just sell it. They always sell it. Riot doesn't do that, and Riot has done a convertible bond in the past also to purchase Bitcoin. So they are a major hodler of Bitcoin, and of course at a 2.24. If they were to issue more shares, that would be accretive. If they were to do convertible debt, and assuming a conversion price at today's price, say in the 2030s, that would also be very accretive. And so Riot probably should do that at some point and add to the Bitcoin bag. That's a good price to NAV right there. Now, moving on to the Ethereum Treasury companies. So, of course, as always, there's Bitcoin Treasury company. They're in a league of their own. They're the main thing, the big thing, and we have recently seen, perhaps, Bitcoin purists would call it a distraction. I call it interesting, and it's the idea of these Ethereum treasury companies kind of picking up Sailor strategy, picking up strategy. It's weird to say strategy. But anyways, picking up that strategy and applying it to Ethereum. But in this case, you're not betting on the future of money. You're betting on a blockchain and a public ownership of a blockchain via the fuel for that blockchain. And the fuel for Ethereum, of course, is ETH. And ETH's value, a lot of people are waiting 10K, right? Taking 10K per ETH, that used to be the big target. A lot of people have been waiting for ETH a long time to get out of its valley of despair, and it has begun doing that a little bit. So it's a bet on ETH. Before you even look at these, you got to figure out whether you like ETH or not, which is a much, much, much harder thing than asking oneself whether you like the business model of, printing $1 for, in the case of SBET, $2.32. So I calculated it. So these ETH companies, they do it different. SBET does something called ETH concentration, which is how many ETHs are there in 1,000 shares of SBET, and they publish that. It's 3.06 ETH per 1,000 shares of SBET. So what is 3.06 ETH worth? That's $11,000. And of course, 1,000 shares of SBET, the stock is trading at $25.81. So that's $25,000. And so you divide 25,810 by 11,000, you get a price to NAV of a 2.32. Dilution is accretive. Losing $1 in order to get in $2.32 is an accretive thing, and SBET seems to be very aggressive in their acquisition because they have over $96 million to go that they got to spend on ETH, and they upped their ATM agreement to $6 billion. So in my view, this is going to be one of the faster horses in the Ethereum treasury companies. They got a lot of shares to print in order to acquire ETH. It's going to be a beautiful thing. Now, let's talk about BMNR. Just a second. BMNR. Where is BMNR? BMNR. Let's talk about BMNR now. So BMNR, this is my first time covering BMNR on the channel. I actually hadn't covered BMNR. I had refrained because the stock had run up so much, and it didn't make really much sense because they are an odd miner, Bitcoin miner, but they essentially exited the business essentially. So this company, for the purpose of this company, it's become much more compelling now. It's become much more compelling now because it got the Peter Thiel investment. It got Cathie Wood's a seal of approval with $182 million investment from Cathie Wood, and they've acquired a lot of Bitcoin, really taking advantage of that huge period of hype when the stock kind of went up to the moon, up to $130 or $140. So anyways, what's the price to NAV for Bitmine right now? They own 1,088,000,000 worth of ETH. So 1,088,000,000 of ETH. The current market cap is 2,040,000,000, and so that would give you a MNAV of 1.87. So not quite as high as SBET's MNAV, but still pretty good. The ATM offering, though, at 2 billion is smaller than that of SBET at 6 billion. So they will take a little longer to raise the Ethereum. So I would rank it as number 2. Unless you feel like going out on the risk curve and you feel like going out on, very, very small caps, and that would be the case of Gamesquare. So Gamesquare is one of the later entrants. The stock has been very, very volatile. It shot almost to 250 and now it halved. So anyways, 127 now. The stock, noteworthy, they have a gaming business that earns 100 million in revenue. So in many ways, 125 million market cap, 100 million in revenue. This is a stock that's trading at 1.25x sales. So keep that in mind when analyzing game. It'd be interesting to actually assess the value of game prior to entering the Ethereum Treasury company. Anyways, they have $36.9 million worth of ETH on the balance sheet, 10,170 ETH. So the value of the ETH owned is 36.9 million. The market cap of game is 125 million. Their price to NAV is a 3.38. So that's the winner from a price to NAV standpoint. Now, of course, small cap, no options, no margin, no nothing. So that's the problem, and that's why, of course, it may have not had just as much attention as the other ones. But out of the 3 ETH treasury companies, Gamesquare's dilution should be the most accretive. Now, of course, because of their size, the ATM is not as big. Their ATM is $250 million ATM. They spent $35 million of that, and they have $250 million of money left on the ATM that they can draw. So they can print another $250 million at $2.38 essentially, and that right there would nearly triple the size of the company if they did that. So to them, 250 million ATM is a huge ATM, but of course it pales in comparison to the 2 billion of BMNR or to the 6 billion of SBET. But these companies are multi-billion in market cap, so it's all relative. This one could be the fastest horse, but definitely not without risk, because it's so small and because it can just be bounced around left and right by the market, like a punching bag, like HIMS has sometimes been. Anyways, the last treasury company, crypto treasury company, is DFDV. So DeFi Development Corp is a Solana treasury company. So assuming you don't think ETH is going to be the big multifunctional blockchain, the big winner of Web3, assuming you think there's going to be another winner of Web3, well, right now there's really 2 big camps that are fighting. It's Solana and it's Ethereum. Solana's fighting Ethereum. If you were to believe that Ethereum is actually going to win over, when Solana is actually going to win over Ethereum, this would be your option. DeFi Development Corp. Their MNAV is a 2.23. Note how the MNAV went down for the longest time. This MNAV was higher than that. I distinctly remember being well above a 3. So it went down, and of course the stock went down a little bit. This is a bet on ETH. It's okay that it's a 2.23 on the MNAV because they have that 5 billion equity line of credit. The reason why they did an equity line of credit is because they missed the deadline to do an ATM. So they couldn't do an ATM. They had to find a roundabout way to do something like an ATM. So they do an ELOC, equity line of credit. Slightly different. Next year they will file for an ATM, but they're still able to sell these dollars, in their case, for $2.23, and they accrete the 1.23, and they accumulate SOL per share, more SOL per share for you. And the stock is trading at $21.48. There's 9.72 SOL per share. You can see that has increased by 79% over the past 3 months. What if they do it again? And again, you can see if the stock price doesn't move, it just grows into its valuation. Again, prerequisite to like DFDV is you have to like Solana. Prerequisite to like Ethereum, to like Game or SBET or BMNR is you have to like Ethereum, and prerequisite to like any of these, aside from maybe KULR, but as an underlying business. But if you want to like any of these other ones, the prerequisite is obviously to like Bitcoin and believe that Bitcoin is the future of money, because these companies would go bust in the event any of these free assets, whatever it is, Ethereum, Solana, or Bitcoin, were to go to zero. These companies would not make it. Now, it's up to you to assess whether you think these assets are going to go to zero. I, for one, generally don't think so, and I especially don't think that Bitcoin is going to go to zero. For the other layer 1 Web3 blockchains like Ethereum or Solana, we are still in a state of war. We still don't really know who's going to win, although a lot of advocates are saying because of the stablecoin act now and because of a Genius Act really kind of cementing stablecoin and everything of the future, a lot of people are saying that ETH is kind of safe now because ETH is going to be running stablecoins going forward. But then again, Solana could run the stablecoins. So you get that the ETH treasury companies or the Solana treasury companies are an entirely different animal, and they are way riskier than the Bitcoin treasury companies. But then within each of these segments, there is only one blue chip, and I will always say it, and it is Strategy. Strategy is a blue chip out of the bunch. This was obviously not investment advice, never investment advice on this channel. This is only entertainment. I am an entertainer. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful, wonderful day.